NATO and the European Union are building their own dialogues and interaction structures with Central Asian countries and the countries of the South Caucasus. And probably no one can see any hidden pitfalls in this. Moreover, the case, as we are observing now, is that the West is trying to use these connections not so much for mutually beneficial cooperation, but to detach these countries from the Russian Federation. We will counteract such tendencies with all available means, diplomatic, political, economic, of course, and we do not want our allies, our like-minded partners in Central Asia, in the Caucasus, in other parts of the Eurasian continent, for their goodwill used to exploit them and push them into opposition with Russia, which is absolutely unnatural for their economic and political interests. In Alaska, through President Putin, we double-checked with Mr. Witkoff, who was present there, whether we understood this proposal correctly. In the presence of his president, he confirmed that our understandings are correct, and we said that we are ready to move towards finalizing agreements on this basis. And by and large, we are still waiting for confirmation from the United States of the proposals they sent us and which we have taken as a basis. Yes, well, regarding the change of position, yes, of course, it was surprising that suddenly President Trump again reverted to positions that seem to have been long settled and that reflect only the feverish desire of the Europeans and the Zelensky regime to get a pause in order to rearm. The Kiev structure, as they call it there, the office of the president. The armed forces of Ukraine and all other components of the Kiev regime. And President Trump, after Alaska, repeatedly, and before Alaska, by the way, said that long-term sustainable peace is needed, not some temporary ceasefire that will achieve nothing, even if it lasts a year or two. These are his words. So I hope that the logic which was adopted by the United States, the logic of establishing a long-term peace, will prevail. There is no longer any talk of extension. It's about when we ceased participation in these agreements as a gesture of goodwill. President Putin decided that until its expiration in February 2026, we will adhere to the quantitative limits on those categories of strategic arms covered by the New START Treaty. And since the expiration date of this treaty in February 2026 is approaching, and there are options to maintain at least some constraints in the field of strategic stability are not visible. The President proposed the initiative to extend our voluntary compliance with these quantitative indicators, with the understanding that the United States will take the same step. I hope that we can receive a positive response from the United States to the proposal that they also agree unilaterally to adhere to the quantitative indicators established in the New START Treaty. President Trump has spoken positively about this initiative by President Putin several times. So, in fact, we are hoping that these positive remarks will materialize into some official announcement.
Are there any responses through diplomatic channels to the tests of the Russian cruise missile with a nuclear power unit, Burevestnik?
Through diplomatic channels, I haven't heard any responses. Everything has somehow gone quiet. Any contacts between the CIS countries at the central level, at the level of central governments, presidents, heads of executive power, parliaments and, of course, regions are also a very promising form of our cooperation, which has long been developed. There are special regional forums within the structure of our relations with many Commonwealth of Independent States countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Belarus, of course, and many others. So here, and by the way, cooperation between regions is developing across the entire range of issues and areas. This is, of course, trade, economy, investments, first and foremost, but at the same time, humanitarian and educational contacts, mutual tours are also widely represented. No, here, in fact, I think there are no doubts that this is a very promising direction. This is the basis, this is the foundation. Connections between regions are, as they say, grassroots, and we encourage this in every way.
What is the value of French President Macron's initiative on the so-called European political community, where they deliberately and publicly refused to invite Russia and Belarus, thus creating something like the European part of the OSCE, minus two countries that are met with disapproval in the West and whose policies are met with disapproval? Today, Alexander Grigorievich Lukashenko spoke about this in great detail and convincingly. And it is clear that they do not hide the preparations they are making against the Union State, Russia and Belarus, preparation for a new big European war. The plans to intensify NATO's activities in the Arctic cannot help but cause concern, which we, as I am convinced the majority of sensible countries, would like to see as a territory of peace and cooperation. This is precisely what was agreed upon within the framework of the Arctic Council. But since then, the West has been trying to isolate Russia from this structure. NATO does not neglect other regions of Eurasia, such as the Middle East, the South Caucasus, Central Asia, and South Asia. Moreover, they work with these sub-regions individually, not in the context of concerns for pan-continental or pan-Eurasian interests. Everywhere they try to establish themselves and influence these processes. And this influence, due to the alliance's aggressive policy, is in most cases extremely negative. A reasonable question arises: if the general trend is such, do we want our vast and beautiful continent to be turned into a domain of NATO? We cannot agree with this. The leadership of most European countries is doing everything possible to persuade the US administration to abandon the idea of resolving the situation in Ukraine by addressing the root causes of the conflict at the negotiating table. But we still hope that President Trump sincerely strives to resolve the Ukrainian crisis and will remain committed to the principles developed at the summit in Vancouver, which were based on American proposals. I would like to ask, do Europeans feel safer when their elites brandish the axe of war? I think the answer is obvious. By the way, we have repeatedly said that we had and have no intention of attacking any of the current NATO and European Union member countries. We are ready to enshrine this position in future security guarantees for this part of Eurasia. But from considering these future guarantees on a collective basis, European Union leaders live proudly declaring that after the Ukrainian crisis, there should be security guarantees, not with Russia, but against Russia.
Here's a sample of thinking.